about this later. Why don't we get our guests out here?
Okay.
Think we should?
All right. Okay.
Folks, let me tell you what, you're in for a treat tonight. We've got from the Castlerock Museum over there in Alma, Wisconsin, we've got Bill Walcott and Gary Schlossteiner. Hey, welcome, gentlemen. Glad to have you here. So, Alma, Wisconsin. Tell the folks just a little bit about Alma, where it's at, what it's like.
Well, Alma, Wisconsin is a historic little old town that's right along the river. Lock and Dam on one side, hills on the other side, Castlerock Museum in the middle.
Oh,
Typical small town America.
all right. Tell us a little bit about Castlerock Museum.
Castlerock Museum actually is really a world-class museum as far as quality and extent is concerned. And it's in Alma rather than in the Twin Cities or Chicago or Vienna or Paris.
So why would you choose Alma, Wisconsin to put a world-class museum?
Primarily because that's where I live, and after I had accumulated the collection and realized the educational value it had, I felt that it had to be out where the public could see it, and I did not want to ship it off to Chicago or places like that. I was contacted by several large museums that would have been very happy to take the collection, but then I lose control of it, and I also lose the ability to enhance it.
Sure. So how did you get started collecting?
When I was a 10-year-old boy, I was walking down the street in Winona, Minnesota, haunting the secondhand shops with my couple dollars of accumulated allowance. And I went into the chicken gusses and bought a Civil War musket for $3.
So what are some of the highlights of your collection?
Well, if you go to an Arms and Armor museum, you're looking for arms and armor, and particularly when we think of armor, we normally think of the knight in shining armor, and probably the most special piece in our collection is an entire suit of shining armor of the time period of 1520. We're able to date it within 5 years of when it was built. It was constructed exactly to the measurements of the man that it was made for. It's still all present and exact today, and practically the mirror image of the one that's in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Ancient Greece is as far back as we go, but the earliest helmet that we have, for instance, is a Corinthian helmet from 2,500 years ago. We have, during the period of the Crusades, a Crusader sword that we took to England and had authenticated as having actually been carried in the first Crusades in marvelous condition for its age. Everybody around our countryside is interested in Vikings, of course. We got a beautiful chieftain sword with gold and silver inlays in it that was found less than 20 years ago by a couple of canoers on a small river just off the Rhine.
So now I understand that some of your displays are kind of unique. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, if you go to a museum, normally everything, you can't get close to it. You have to be back 6 feet or more. Practically everything is covered in glass or plastic or something like that. There's guards standing everywhere watching you. There's no real information on the walls themselves, nothing pictorially to explain how these things were actually used. We think that we shouldn't just have an old piece or a pretty piece. We should be able to tell a story. The story should be able to tell how the average fighting man, not just the great nobles, how they actually lived and how they actually fought their battles and won their wars in those days. And that's basically the way we've got it set up. We intermix art from the time period, not the original very, very valuable painting, but a beautiful reproduction of it, mixed in with the real authentic pieces that we have that show how these things were being used back at the time period when they were really in use. We found that that's gone over very well. We've got a big open expansive room that we're in. The building itself looks like a castle, a modern built castle, but a castle. It's all very well lit. We let people get up very, very close to it. Most of our exhibits, the person can get inside of 3 feet to be able to look very closely at an object. Another thing, we've worked very hard on trying to display it so that it's pleasant in the way it looks, and our exhibit designer has done a beautiful job of presenting it that way.
So what are some of the misconceptions about arms and armor that
You
run
want to
into?
take that one, Bill?
Sure. Well, one of the big misconceptions is how heavy it is. Everybody just assumes that the armor's so heavy you could barely maneuver in it. But that's not the case at all. If it was so heavy you couldn't fight in it, if you couldn't mount your horse yourself, it would be too heavy to be a liability and you wouldn't have worn it. We have a sword above the bookcase in the museum, and it's a two-handed sword that would have been used by German mercenaries to break up pike formations at the end of the Middle Ages, going into the Renaissance period. And we always ask visitors, how much does this two-handed sword weigh? Because it's over 6 feet long.
Oh, wow.
And we'll get a kid come up and he'll say 50 pounds. And you think, well, how would you swing 50 pounds? And it only weighs 8 pounds. Most big weapons like that weigh less than 10 pounds.
So now we are in for a treat. You did bring a few things for us to look at, I take it.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Great. What do we got?
Why don't we start with the helmet, and I'll hold it and Gary can describe it to you.
That reminds me of looking for the Fountain of Youth, like Ponce de Leon. You used to see the pictures.
That's right. That's the image that everybody thinks of when they think of the Spanish conquistadors.
Yep.
Actually, it's an Italian style. It was used all over Europe like that. Our earliest helmets are made of bronze, and after that, they're made of small pieces of iron that are ridged together. But this actually is made out of one piece of metal. There is no weld mark in it anywhere. But just imagine, this entire helmet is made out of one piece into the forge until iron can be formed and hammered a little bit until the temperature changes, back into the forge, back and forth. Look at how protective it is. The swords slide off the top. It's very strong. Can take tremendous impact. We were just talking about how heavy full armor is. And people think that something like this is going to be very, very clumsy, and it's not. Bill mentioned about the fact that we've got a full set of armor where a man's clothed in armor from his head to his foot, the full plate, 1500s period of time. The total weight of that is only 65 pounds. Every piece in it is articulated. Look at here how the fingers move. Now the knight in shining armor fought on horseback. He came into the fray with a long, heavy lance, but before the battle was more than a few minutes old, horses were bumping into horses, fully armored knights were bumping into each other. They were fighting now with short weapons and weapons that were designed to hurt at short range. This is an example of a battle hammer. You notice it's got a hammer on one side. You like to head for the head with this particular side there, because it makes quite a gong noise when you hit the other person on the head with it, and it temporarily disconnabulates them. If you get a good chance to puncture armor, even armor can be punctured with something like this. This is a left-hand dagger. Would have been worn by the person in his left hand. He would have worn the sword in his right hand. This is a sword made in the middle 1500s by a man named Johannes Wundes. As he's fighting with the sword like this, the other fellow on the other side's got the same kind of thing. And he's swinging that at him too. He's trying to catch it with this sword here too, but if he doesn't catch it with this sword here too, then that's what the left-hand dagger is for. It's to catch the other man's sword so that it catches in here like this before it gets to him like that. Now let's take a look at the mace over there. I said that the knights fought head to head like that, shoulder to shoulder more probably. And this is a weapon that's been in use ever since the caveman. The caveman found he was more effective if he picked up a club than if he just threw a rock. This is the first mace that I ever got. I got this in England back in the 1980s. It's got an actual break mark all the way across here with brazing that shows that this was actually completely broken in half at one point in its life. It's got one of the flukes here that's broken off like that. And I always liked to, in my earlier years when I was an active judge, to keep this on my desk because it made such a nice paper weight and it rested so nicely like that. It was also very effective when we were doing plea bargaining discussions. This is an executioner's sword. It's from the late 1600s. If you'll notice, it's got a flat, straight off edge. That's because the executioner doesn't stab him when he just simply uses it to cut his head off very neatly. And in order to do a nice, neat job, he wants a heavy sword with a lot of weight out at the end like that. He often also has it engraved. This one here's got some beautiful engraving on it. On the one side, it says in Germanic script, "I carry out the wishes of my master." On the other side, it says, May God have mercy on the soul of this poor sinner.
What else you got there, Earl? Oh,
I spoke of Grecian pieces before, and I mentioned that we had a Grecian helmet. In fact, we got 3 Grecian helmets that are all over 2,000 years old, being 3 different styles of Greece. This is an earpiece. This would have been the piece
that hung down
that
the
hung
side,
on the
yeah.
side of his helmet, and you'll notice it hangs like this. So as that earpiece sits there, his mouth is open, his eyes are visualized, his nose is protected. He was always very interested in protecting his nose. All early helmets have nose guards of one kind.
there's some stuff up there.
This is the weapon that really was the main weapon of the average fighting man. Imagine this fully armored knight. He's got a horse that's completely armored across the chest, completely armored across the head as well. He's charging down on this poor foot soldier, and that was 90% of the men on the battlefield. The poor foot soldier is not wearing armor. He's maybe wearing a metal helmet. That's about all he can afford. But he can manage to hold off and handle a knight with a weapon like this, which was invented by the Swiss in the 1400s. Here comes the horse. The horse comes, he sets that against his foot like that. He drops that chest high on the horse. The man on foot and the man on horseback know that horse is going to swing one side or another. So as that horse swings one side or another, this foot soldier called a halberdier comes up with this like this, with the spike out like that, swings at the man as he's going by him on the horse like that, tries to hook a plate of armor or something on him like that, hopefully being able to dislodge him so he falls
Get him
off the horse.
Now, for the folks out at home that are watching and they want to get some more information about that, what is your website and contact information there?
Well, they can go to castlerockmuseum.com, and they can find pretty much anything they need to there. They can also go on Facebook to find the latest about events and things like that we're doing at the museum.
Well, what type of special events do you do there?
Well, we do probably 15 to 20 events a year, ranging from talks on things like medieval falconry to our big gala that we do every June, where people can actually see sword fighting demonstrations right out on the street in front of the museum. So we do movie nights, there's really something for everybody.
I did notice down here there was a couple things. It had, it was a couple mugs and hats. What was
Well, we brought those for you and Earl.
Really?
So,
Hey, you did good there,
and while we thought, while we're bringing them, we might as well bring enough for the whole audience.
Hey, now there's again, folks. This shows you why this is the hottest ticket in town. Well, guys, thanks so much again for coming. It was really
Thanks
great
for
to
having
see this and great to meet you guys. And Earl, keep those bricks up there so you can take your horseshoe lessons too,
Going to
okay?
help because we're going to use cement this
All
time.
right. And folks, if you're still watching, means one of two things, you know that. Either you're a fan or the remote needs a new battery. Either way, thanks for watching. We'll see you again. Good night, everybody.